The hallway hummed with an atmosphere that only the first day of school could generate, a mix of thrill and disorder. But for 8-year-old Emma Parker, none of it registered as she walked through the main entrance of Brooklyn Elementary. Her small hand clutched the strap of her backpack, while her other adjusted the small device fastened behind her ear. It was her hearing aid, her connection to the world, and, consequently, her vulnerability. Children's laughter and chatter filled the air around her, but to Emma, it was mostly a jumble of indistinct noises and muffled sounds. She had adapted to the sense of isolation, though it never became any easier. Her blue eyes scanned from one new face to the next, hoping for a sign of safety or kindness, but she found only averted looks and hushed murmurs. Ashley Moore was standing by the lockers, her arms folded, flanked by two girls who laughed just a little too forcefully. Ashley was tall for her age, self-assured, and clearly the one in control. Her eyes immediately fixated on Emma's hearing aid, her lips forming a sneer that held a surprising amount of malice for a fourth grader. Emma attempted to slip by without being seen, making her way to the cafeteria. Her grandmother had lovingly prepared her favorite meal in a tidy pink bento box. Rice balls formed like bears and a small note that said, "You're brave. Love, Nana." She hadn't even lifted the lid when Ashley's hands shot across the table, sending the box tumbling to the floor. Rice spilled onto the floor like scattered confetti. A shocked hush fell over the room as Emma stood motionless, tears of humiliation stinging her eyes, her hands shaking as they welled up. It was at that precise moment that the main glass doors of the school swung open, and in walked Max, an enormous German shepherd with soulful amber eyes and a demeanor that immediately silenced the space. Max made no sound, no bark, no growl. He simply moved forward with measured, deliberate strides, heading directly for Emma. Murmurs of astonishment spread through the cafeteria as Max came in, his dense coat slightly damp from the morning mist, his large body almost taking up the entire doorway. The overhead fixtures highlighted the silver hairs around his muzzle, the quiet strength in his gait, and a look in his eyes that seemed ancient, observant, and filled with purpose. Ashley instinctively took a step back, her sneer disappearing for the first time, while her friends grabbed at her sleeves, suddenly nervous. Max did not need to bark or show his teeth. His presence was enough. He came to a halt right before Emma, turning his body to shield her from the others. His tail was still, and his head was lowered slightly in a protective, unwavering stance. Emma blinked, astonished, using the back of her sleeve to wipe away her tears. "Max," she whispered. The huge shepherd turned his head to face her, as if to say, "I'm here." From the corridor, a teacher rushed in, her breath catching as she took in the scene. "Whose dog is this?" she exclaimed, half in panic, already reaching for her radio. Emma drew a breath and stepped forward. "He's mine," she stated, her voice gentle yet firm. "His name is Max. He's my service dog." This wasn't entirely accurate. Max had not been formally registered, at least not yet. But he was her guardian, her friend, the final present from her mother, Caroline, before cancer claimed her life. Max had been by Emma's side ever since. The room stayed quiet as Max calmly pressed his nose into Emma's hand, paying no attention to the spilled lunch on the floor. The moment felt strangely sacred. One girl, one dog, and a cafeteria full of onlookers who now saw something entirely new. Max was more than a pet. He was her protector. And on this day, for the very first time, Emma was not alone. The school gymnasium throbbed with excitement. Folding tables were arranged along the walls, each adorned with bright posters, bubbling volcano experiments, and solar system models dangling from strings. The Brooklyn Elementary Science Fair was finally here, and for Emma Parker, it was a momentous occasion. Her project was displayed prominently near the middle. "Do dogs feel what we feel?" The presentation board was meticulously organized with hand-drawn charts, graphs detailing heart rate information, and pictures of Max reacting to her feelings, nuzzling her during her tears, resting his head on her lap during moments of anxiety. Every interaction had been carefully documented and recorded. This was more than a school assignment. It was her personal truth. Ashley loitered by the snack table, observing with narrowed eyes. She had barely said a word to Emma since the cafeteria incident, but Emma could sense her stare, the intensity of her unspoken resentment. When a few students paused to look at her project and inquire about Max, Emma smiled with a shy pride blooming on her face. That was when it occurred. As Emma moved away to discuss her presentation time with a teacher, an unseen person ripped one of her graphs straight down the center. Another board was defaced with juice, which dripped lazily onto a printed photograph of Max. A soda can had been tipped over, soaking the paper beneath it. Emma came back to discover her table destroyed. She stood still for a moment, unable to breathe. Then her eyes filled with tears, her hands quivering as she reached for the ruined pictures. The ache in her chest was overwhelming. Without saying anything, Emma turned and fled from the gym, running down the corridor, past the lockers, and out into the crisp air through the school's side doors. Far from there, nearly 7 miles across the city, Max, who was staying temporarily with Emma's grandmother, raised his head. His ears pricked up. Then, without a second's thought, he charged toward the front door. Something was amiss, and he would let nothing prevent him from reaching her. The wind swept through the deserted side courtyard as Emma sat huddled on the chilly concrete steps, her back against the brick wall and her knees hugged tightly to her chest. Tears stained her face, yet she was completely silent, not even a whimper escaping her. She was accustomed to the quiet. It was the state in which most of her world existed. She did not perceive the rustling at the other end of the yard or the sound of claws on the pavement, but she sensed it. Emma raised her head just as Max came charging around the corner, his fur on end, his tongue out, his eyes fixated on her like a homing missile. 7 miles, 4 fences, and 1 high-traffic road. Somehow, he had done it. He skidded to a halt before her, nudging her arm and then her face, as if to tally her tears. He then lay down next to her, his warm body pressed against her shaking one. "How did you?" she whispered, her voice faltering. "How did you know?" Inside the gym, the abrupt entrance of a large German shepherd caused screams to erupt. Teachers rushed around as students backed away in surprise. But Max was unfazed. He moved through the crowd with a calm resolve, ignoring the commotion, until he reached Emma's destroyed project display. He sat down, not in aggression, but in a protest of sorrow, in solidarity. Mrs. Carlson, the science teacher, approached him with caution. "Is this Emma's dog?" she inquired, her gaze shifting between Max and the tattered project. Ashley stood frozen nearby, the blood draining from her face. Max remained still and silent, but his presence conveyed everything. Someone had wronged Emma, and he had come not for retribution, but to bear witness, to demonstrate that love could traverse any distance. The morning sky over Hillcrest Nature Reserve was a canvas of gray clouds shot through with sunlight, and the air smelled of wet leaves and pine. Emma lingered at the trailhead, adjusting her backpack, her spirit still heavy from the emotional toll of the previous week. She hadn't wanted to participate. Field trips were not her favorite, especially those involving extensive hikes, bug repellent, and the pretense that all was well. But Mrs. Carlson had softly encouraged her. "Nature helps us breathe," she had told her. Emma had agreed with a nod, though she wasn't entirely persuaded. Max was not permitted this time. It was school policy, they explained. He wasn't an official service dog. Emma had argued, but ultimately, she had come by herself. Ashley was a short distance ahead, her voice loud as she chatted, throwing looks back at Emma that felt like taunts. The hostility hadn't truly ceased. At a rest area deep along the forest trail, the class stopped to eat. Emma chose a quiet boulder under a large tree and took out her sandwich. Ashley strolled past, her voice just loud enough for Emma to overhear. "Should have brought your bodyguard, freak." Emma didn't respond. She was weary of fighting battles that no one else could perceive. But as the group got ready to leave, a sudden, awkward scuffle began. Ashley, annoyed, turned. "You're in my way again." Emma tried to move aside, but her foot snagged on a root. Before she could regain her footing, Ashley gave her a shove that was too forceful. Emma crashed to the ground, her ankle twisting at a painful angle as a sharp cry of pain escaped her. The others had already begun walking and did not see her fall. By the time Emma opened her eyes again, the forest was quiet. The sound of her classmates' laughter had disappeared into the woods, and she was all alone. The sun sank lower behind the canopy, painting long shadows across the forest. Emma lay still on a carpet of damp leaves, her face ashen, her breathing faint. Her twisted ankle pulsed with each beat of her heart, the pain radiating through her small body like a fire. She tried to call for help once, then twice, but her voice was barely a whisper and didn't travel far. No one answered. Miles away from Hillcrest, Max began to stir. He had been restlessly pacing by the door of Emma's house all morning, his ears twitching and nose lifting every few moments as if he could detect something beyond human senses. Suddenly, he threw himself at the door, letting out a single, deep bark. Emma's grandmother grabbed for her coat, but before she could intervene, Max burst through the side gate and onto the street, running as if he knew his exact destination. Through traffic, across fields, and down winding dirt roads, 7 miles driven by instinct and love. By the time the park ranger got the alert about a missing student, Max had already breached the reserve's perimeter, his nose to the earth, navigating through pine trees and thorny bushes, each stride quicker than the one before. Emma was slipping in and out of consciousness when she felt it, a gentle nudge on her hand. Her eyes fluttered open to the sight of Max's familiar face over her, his eyes wide and concerned. "Max," she whispered, the sound almost inaudible. He licked her cheek once, then turned and barked sharply. 1, 2, 3 urgent calls. They weren't frantic or wild, but purposeful, like a flare made of sound. Within minutes, a search party, notified by park rangers and a panicked teacher, homed in on the sound. Flashlights cut through the undergrowth. "There," someone yelled. Emma was discovered curled up next to Max, her hand resting on his fur. She was alive because he had found her. The scent of antiseptic and clean linens permeated Emma's hospital room. Her ankle was treated and bandaged, and while the pain remained, it was muted by medicine and by Max, who was curled up at the end of her bed, his tail giving a soft thump against the mattress with each of her breaths. It was calm now, serene, but the serenity was short-lived. Outside, in the West Wing of Brooklyn Community Hospital, something had gone terribly wrong. An old power unit in a storage area overloaded. Sparks ignited wires, and flames traveled up the drywall long before any fire alarm sounded. Within moments, smoke billowed into the corridors, obscuring the fluorescent lights and filling the air with chaos. Emma sat up, coughing. Max's ears perked up instantly. He was on his feet before the second alarm blared. Staff rushed past, shouting instructions to evacuate and head for the stairwells. But in the confusion, doors were shut, routes were blocked, and panic reigned. 2 floors down, Ashley Moore had just been discharged from a minor appendectomy. Alone in a supply closet and still groggy from the anesthesia, she awoke to the faint smell of burning plastic and a thick haze seeping under the door. She tried the doorknob. It was locked. Her chest grew tight. Max darted out of Emma's room, weaving through people and pushing through the smoke. He stopped at each hallway, his nose in the air, searching, until he halted at the base of the locked door where Ashley was trapped. She pounded feebly. "Help," her voice rasped. "Please, somebody." Max barked, loudly and insistently. He clawed at the bottom of the door, pacing. A nurse rounded the corner. "There's someone in there," she yelled. A janitor hurried over with his keys. The door burst open, and a thick cloud of smoke poured out. Ashley stumbled out and froze. Max stood before her, as if he had been waiting. Their eyes met. Her lips moved. You came back again." He moved aside, giving her a gentle nudge toward the exit. Moments later, Emma and Ashley walked out side by side through the hospital's emergency tunnel, guided by Max's steady presence and quiet courage. That night, as the fire was put out and the fear subsided into contemplation, a transformation took place. Ashley no longer saw just a dog, but a hero. And for the very first time, she truly saw Emma, not as someone different, but as someone strong. The next morning, a gentle golden light streamed through the hospital blinds. The building was quiet once more. The smoke had dissipated, and the alarms were silent. In room 204, Emma sat with Max, stroking the thick fur on his neck. He had not left her for a moment. A knock came at the door. Emma looked up and saw Ashley in the doorway, her hospital attire replaced with jeans and a sweatshirt. She seemed changed, not just from the previous night, but from all the days that had come before. Her eyes held a new expression, vulnerability, and perhaps a touch of bravery. "Hey," Ashley said, pausing. "Can I come in?" Emma gave a slow nod. Max stayed still, his gaze calm and steady. Ashley came in, and took the chair opposite her. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "For what Max did. For what you did." Emma looked down, not knowing how to reply. "I was mean," Ashley went on. "I knew it. I didn't want to admit it, but I was just mad that people liked your project, that Max made people feel something. I guess I was jealous." A silence settled between them, not awkward, but honest. Ashley reached over and placed her hand gently on Max's paw. "I want to help now, with whatever you and Max are doing." At that moment, Dr. Henry Moore, Ashley's father, came down the hall looking for his daughter. As he entered the room, his gaze fell upon Max, and his expression changed. "Wait a minute," he said quietly, moving closer. "This dog." He knelt down, peering at Max's eyes, and then at the small scar near his front leg. "I treated a German Shepherd puppy with that same scar 8 years ago," he said softly. "A stray with a broken leg. Caroline Parker adopted him." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. He was so little then, but even back then, he had those eyes. Emma's breath hitched. Max lifted his head, his tail giving a single tap against the floor. A flicker of recognition passed between the man and the dog, silent but unmistakable. Dr. Moore stood up, exhaling slowly. He was always special. Days later, the school board convened. The story of the fire, the rescue, and the bravery had spread through the town like a wildfire. Letters came in from parents, teachers, and neighbors. Finally, the board reached a unanimous decision. Max would be officially welcomed as a therapy dog at Brooklyn Elementary. Emma and Ashley, once adversaries, now collaborated, creating a new school initiative called Paws for Kids to help other students build confidence and find solace through animals. On the program's first day, Emma looked at Max, her friend and her hero, and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" Max wagged his tail and then rested his head softly on her hand. In that quiet moment, surrounded by laughter, new friendships, and second chances, it was clear that one dog's love had not just saved a girl, it had healed an entire community.